Stop! You'll die out there! The alien girl's voice trembled through the storm of violet dust, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. But the human didn't stop. Elias Ford kept his hands pressed against the shattered reactor core, sparks clawing at his suit as radiation alarms screamed in his helmet. The sky above the alien moon burned in hues of crimson and gold, and the air itself shimmered like boiling glass. He gritted his teeth. If I don't stabilize it now, your whole colony goes up. So either help me or get clear. The girl hesitated, torn between logic and the rising ache in her chest. She had seen soldiers die before, cold, calculated ends on battlefields far from home. But not like this. Not willingly. Not for strangers. Her name was Leora Van, heir to the Azure Crest, one of the ruling houses of the Seraphim Dominion, a race that had seen humans as lesser, fragile, reckless, temporary, and yet here was one, sweating and bleeding under alien light, trying to save a world that wasn't his. Leora stepped closer, her silver cloak whipping in the storm. You can't absorb that much gamma flux, your body already dying. Elias coughed. Yeah, I got that memo. He reached into the reactor's containment core, twisting the manual seal. The energy beam flared, tearing across his arm, leaving his sleeve burned and skin blistered. Still, he kept working, breath ragged. Leora watched, her heart pounding with a feeling she didn't recognize, a mix of fear, anger, and awe. When the final seal locked into place, the reactor's hum softened. The blinding light dimmed, the ground stopped trembling, and Elias collapsed. She caught him before he hit the ground, his helmet flickering out. His eyes, that human shade of storm blue, met hers for the first time without glass between them. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that for us, for me? He smiled weakly. Because someone had to. Then he blacked out. When Elias woke, he was in a translucent chamber, floating in pale blue gel. The ceiling curved above him, like crystal glass with faintly glowing runes drifting across the surface. His body throbbed in dull waves, but he could breathe. He could move. Easy, said a voice behind him. You're safe. Mostly. He turned. Leora stood there in ceremonial robes now, her hair braided with silver threads, her expression unreadable. You stabilized the reactor, she said. My people live because of you. Then I did my job, Elias murmured, trying to sit up. She frowned. You're not a soldier. No. He gave a tired grin. I'm an engineer. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Leora walked closer, eyes softening. You risked everything without hesitation. You could have run. You could have let us die. Elias exhaled slowly. You don't run when lives are on the line. Leora studied him as though he were some strange new species, one her empire's science couldn't explain. In truth, that was exactly what he was to her. A contradiction. Her people built empires through logic and hierarchy. They did not act without reason. They did not sacrifice without purpose. Yet this human, a fragile, short-lived being from a dust world on the edge of known space, had done something none of her kind would dare. And in that quiet recovery room, as his pulse steadied beneath alien light, she realized something dangerous was happening inside her chest. Curiosity, respect, maybe even admiration, the kind that could get her disowned. She turned away sharply. Rest, human, you'll need it. My father will want to see you. Your father? Elias asked. Leora's voice hardened. The High Sovereign of Serapha Prime. Elias leaned back, chuckling under his breath. Guess I'm in trouble. You have no idea, she whispered. But her voice carried something else, too. Something like fear. For him. Because in her world, humans weren't heroes. They were expendable. The hall of the Seraphim Palace was a place where silence weighed heavier than sound. Vast crystalline pillars stretched to a ceiling that shimmered with light from 3 distant suns. Every step echoed like thunder. Every breath felt observed. And in the middle of that echoing chamber, Elias Ford, a human engineer from Earth, stood in front of the High Sovereign Vayan, ruler of the Seraphin dominions and father of Leora. The alien guards surrounding him were twice his height, their armor alive with pulsing runes, weapons drawn but restrained. Elias felt the tension in the air, not the fear of him, but the disgust. To them, he was just human, a reckless creature, a mistake of evolution. The High Sovereign's voice cut through the stillness like a blade. You tampered with a Seraphin reactor, human. That is an act punishable by dissolution. Elias looked up, jaw tight. That reactor was melting down. If I hadn't stepped in, you would have died as was proper. The Sovereign interrupted, his eyes glowing faintly blue. Interference from your kind is forbidden. Leora, standing beside the throne, clenched her hands at her sides. Father, he saved over 10,000 lives, including mine. Because he caused the failure, the Sovereign snapped. Human technology contaminated the array when his ship entered orbit. That's not true, Elias protested. My ship's field was neutralized before descent. The fault was in your coolant system. A design flaw. The court gasped. You could feel the offense ripple like static through the crowd. A human accusing Seraphin engineering of failure? It was blasphemy. The Sovereign leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You presume to lecture my people on their own technology? Elias didn't flinch. If it means saving lives, yes. The silence that followed was electric. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Leora's heart pounded, not just in fear for him, but for what she saw in him. That unyielding defiance, that human stubbornness that bordered on madness. The Sovereign rose, his voice deep as thunder. You insult the Dominion and speak as if we are equals. For this arrogance, you will be confined until judgment. 2 guards stepped forward, but before they could reach him, Leora moved. She stepped between them and Elias, something no princess had ever done in public. Father, she said, her voice steady but shaking beneath. You can't punish him for doing what we couldn't. You taught us that wisdom is found in truth, not pride. He acted from compassion, not rebellion. The Sovereign stared at her. You dare shield him? I dare see him, she whispered. Her father's expression softened for a fraction of a second. Perhaps surprise, perhaps disappointment. Then with a wave of his hand, he turned away. Very well. The human will not be executed, but he will remain under watch. No contact with the royal family. That was his compromise. Mercy, by Seraphin standards. But as Elias was led away, Leora caught his eyes, and that same storm blew burning beneath restraint. I'll be fine, he mouthed, smiling faintly. But Leora could see it. The pain behind the bravado, the injustice that cut deeper than radiation burns. Hours later, in the dim solitude of his cell, Elias sat on the cold metal floor, thinking about Earth, the blue skies, the noise, the freedom. Out here, everything was perfect and sterile, and wrong. He didn't regret saving them. But he wondered if he had just doomed himself for doing the right thing. Then, footsteps. Soft, light, familiar. The door shimmered open. Leora slipped inside, her cloak drawn low. You shouldn't be here, Elias said quietly. I shouldn't, she agreed. But I had to see. What kind of creature risks his life for a people who hate him? Elias looked up at her, tired but unbroken. Maybe the kind that still believes hate can change. For a moment she didn't breathe. The words struck her like a pulse of light through darkness. No Seraphin had ever spoken like that, not in 1,000 years of empire. She stepped closer, her eyes glimmering like starlight. Elias, you truly are impossible. He smiled. You have no idea. And as she turned to leave, the unthinkable began. An alien princess started to question everything she'd ever believed about humans, and herself. The moon of Serapha Prime glowed like frozen fire, its horizon wrapped in ribbons of electric aurora. Below it, the Royal Research Citadel stood silent, except for one chamber lit by the soft pulse of holograms. That chamber was forbidden, and inside it, the alien princess was committing treason. Leora Vian moved carefully, her fingers gliding across the crystal panels as she unlocked the sealed archive. The lights responded to her royal genetic code, but every second risked being caught by the palace sentinels. Behind her, a human voice whispered, "You sure this is a good idea?" Elias stepped through the half-lit doorway, hair messy, expression wary. He still wore the same worn flight jacket, the only piece of earth he had left. "No," Leora replied softly. "But you wanted answers. I intend to find them." The terminal hummed as old data began to unfold in holographic lines. Engineering blueprints, reactor schematics, energy logs. What Elias had claimed was true. The coolant failure had been caused by Seraphan code corruption, not human interference. Someone in her father's council had hidden it. Elias studied the display, jaw tightening. "They blamed me to cover it up." Leora's eyes shimmered in the cold light. "If this reaches the Sovereign, he'll destroy whoever's responsible. That's why they silenced you." "Then we tell him," Elias said. She turned sharply. "You don't understand. If I reveal I accessed restricted data, if they learn I was with you, I'll be stripped of title. Maybe worse." Elias met her gaze. "So what? You'll lose a crown. I'll lose my life." The silence hung heavy between them, the kind that made you aware of every heartbeat. Then Leora looked down, her expression softening. "You always speak like it's that simple," he smiled faintly. "Because it is." That made her laugh, quiet, breathless, the kind of sound that didn't belong in a palace of rules. She shook her head. "You humans are chaos in a body, and you aliens are order trapped in a cage," he replied. "Maybe we balance each other." Before she could respond, a sharp alarm cut through the stillness. A crimson warning rune flashed across the walls. "Unauthorized access detected." "Guards," Leora hissed. "They've traced us." Elias moved fast and pulling the core chip from the console. "We have to go." They ran through the crystal corridors as footsteps thundered behind them. The air shimmered with scanning drones, and Leora's cloak flared like silver fire as she turned corner after corner. They reached the outer terrace, a vast balcony overlooking the glowing city below. The wind howled. There was nowhere else to run. The guards appeared, weapons raised. "Princess Leora Vian," the lead officer called out. "Stand down. You are violating royal security protocols." Leora's pulse hammered. For a second she froze, caught between duty and conscience. Then Elias stepped in front of her, arms raised. "She's not the one who broke in, I did. I forced her to help." Leora's eyes widened. "Elias, no." But he didn't stop. "She tried to stop me." "It's my fault." The officer's visor glowed, scanning him. "Human interference confirmed. You will be detained for questioning." Leora felt her throat tighten. Rage, fear, guilt all crashing together. She had just watched him save her again, and this time it might cost him everything. As the guards moved forward, Leora reached out impulsively, grabbing his hand. "You can't keep doing this," she whispered. He looked at her, calm even in capture. "You said your people value truth. Then tell them." Her hand trembled. "They won't believe me. Then make them." His voice was firm, but his eyes, those soft human eyes, held something she hadn't seen before. Trust. Not just in her, but in the idea that she could change something greater than herself. And then he was taken, dragged into the shadows of the corridor. Leora stood frozen on the terrace, her cloak whipping in the wind, the stolen data chip clutched in her palm. The moonlight burned around her like judgment. She had broken her father's law. She had betrayed her world, and she couldn't stop shaking, not from fear, but from the truth she'd seen in that human's eyes. The great hall of judgment was filled with light, not warm, golden light like on earth, but cold, sterile brilliance that stripped every shadow away. To the Seraphans, light meant truth. To Elias Ford, it felt like exposure. He stood on a raised platform, wrists bound by luminous cuffs that hummed with low energy. Around him, thousands of alien eyes watched from tiered balconies. The council chamber curved like an amphitheater of glass and crystal. Magnificent, yes, but merciless. and at its center sat the High Sovereign. Beside him, Princess Leora, her face hidden behind the veil of royal decorum, her hands clenched in silence. A voice echoed across the chamber, magnified by the hall's resonant architecture. "Elias Ford of Terra," intoned the Prime Arbiter. "You stand accused of tampering with restricted Seraphim systems, endangering royal security, and deceiving the crown. How do you plead?" Elias took a breath. His throat was dry, his pulse steady. "I didn't endanger anyone. I exposed a flaw that your engineers ignored." A low murmur rippled through the hall. The Arbiter's tone sharpened. "Do you deny accessing forbidden archives?" "I accessed what I had to," Elias replied. "Because the truth was being buried." The Sovereign's eyes glowed faintly blue. "And why?" he asked, voice heavy as iron. "Would a human risk his life for a lie he cannot survive?" Elias lifted his head. "Because it wasn't a lie." A sharp intake of air swept the crowd. From her seat, Leora could barely breathe. Every word he spoke was another blade against his own neck. But it was the same courage that had first drawn her to him. The Arbiter gestured, and a holographic projection appeared, footage from the security logs. It showed Elias and Leora inside the restricted archive. Together, the crowd gasped. The Sovereign's gaze hardened. "So," he said coldly, "my daughter conspired with you." Elias's voice rose. "No, she tried to stop me." Leora's heart twisted. She could stay silent and save herself, or speak and lose everything. She rose from her seat. "That's not true." The chamber froze, every eye turned toward her. The air seemed to hold its breath. Leora stepped forward, removing her veil. Her silver eyes burned with resolve. "I went with him because I wanted to know. Because what he found was real. The coolant failure wasn't human error. It was a cover-up from within our own council." The Sovereign's expression flickered, a brief shadow of disbelief. "You accuse my advisors?" "I accuse whoever values pride over lives," she said, voice steady. "He didn't endanger us. He saved us." "He saved me." The council erupted in noise, shock, outrage, denial. Guards tensed, waiting for command. The Sovereign raised his hand and silence returned. "Daughter," he said, each word deliberate. "You defy your station. You violate your oath." Leora's chin lifted. "Then strip me of it." Elias stared at her, stunned, speechless. He had expected her to protect herself, to stay safe in her world of rules and titles. Instead, she stood there bare and proud, defying the Empire itself. The Sovereign's eyes darkened. "You would fall for a human's lies?" "He didn't lie," she cried. "He showed us who we are and afraid to face our own mistakes." The silence that followed was no longer calm. It was cracking. The Seraphim people, so used to order, had just witnessed something forbidden, truth spoken from royal lips. Elias took a small step forward. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "if you won't believe me, look at this." He lifted the stolen core chip, its light flickering weakly. "This holds the logs, the real ones. You'll see your coolant lines were bypassed manually, by your chief scientist." Gasps. The Sovereign looked toward his guards, who confirmed the match with instant scans. The hall rippled in chaos. The truth could no longer be denied. But the Sovereign's face showed no triumph, only exhaustion and something deeper. "Fear. Remove the human," he commanded softly, "before the council tears itself apart." As Elias was dragged away again, he caught Leora's eyes, just for a second. He mouthed one word, "Why?" Her lips trembled, but she smiled through the ache. "Because you made me believe." Later, as the doors closed and the hall emptied, the Sovereign looked down at his daughter. "You've doomed yourself, Leora." "Maybe," she said quietly. "But I think I've saved something else." The storm over Serapha Prime came without warning. Bolts of blue lightning tore across the crystal skyline, thunder rolling through the city like an ancient beast awakening. Inside the palace detention tower, Elias Ford stood in the dim light of his cell, wrists still bound. He could hear the chaos outside. Orders shouted, alarms flaring, the sounds of a world trying to bury the truth he'd unearthed. The door hissed open. He turned, expecting guards. Instead, her, Leora. He breathed. The princess stepped in, her silver cloak soaked from rain, her eyes burning with determination. "There's no time," she said, moving fast to deactivate the bindings on his wrists. They've ordered your execution before sunrise. Elias froze. What? Why? The truth's out. Exactly, she whispered. That's why they can't let you live. He stared at her for a moment, disbelief warring with trust. You're risking everything. I already did, she said softly. Now move. They ran through the labyrinth of corridors, their footsteps echoing between walls of glass and gold. Every turn felt like borrowed time. Outside, the storm raged, lighting the city in flashes that painted everything in flickering silver. When they reached the sky bridge, a massive transparent walkway stretching across the Capitol's spire, Elias stopped in awe despite himself. The entire alien city was spread below them like a sea of living light, its towers glowing through the storm. Beautiful, he muttered. Leora looked at him, breathless. We can admire it if we survive. He smiled faintly. Fair. Halfway across the bridge, alarms screamed again. Metal shutters began to close at both ends. They've locked it down, Elias shouted. Leora pulled a small crystal from her belt. Then we make our own exit. She pressed it against the glass wall, and the crystal detonated in a burst of silent light, opening a glowing breach. Wind roared through, nearly throwing them off balance. Elias looked down, 1,000 meters of nothing beneath them. You've got to be kidding. Leora grabbed his hand. There's a maintenance platform 3 levels down. We jump, he blinked. You call that a plan? I call it hope, she said, and leapt. Elias had about 1 second to think she's insane before he followed her. The wind tore past them, his stomach dropping as lightning flashed around them. And then, mercifully, he landed on solid metal beside her. They both hit hard, rolling across the slick platform until they stopped against a railing. Elias groaned, half laughing, half in pain. You're definitely not the cautious type. Leora grinned breathlessly. You taught me that. The moment almost felt like peace, until gunfire shredded the air. Energy bolts scorched the railing where they'd just been standing. Guards, Elias yelled. They dove behind cover as drones swooped overhead, scanning with searchlights. Elias glanced around desperately. We need a way out. Leora pointed toward a small hover skiff docked on the platform's edge. That one's unguarded. Elias ran for it, dodging the streaks of blue fire. His hands moved with practiced speed, hot-wiring the skiff's core. Come on, come on. The engine roared to life. Leora jumped aboard, her hair whipping in the wind. As the guards closed in, Elias yanked the throttle, and the skiff shot forward into the storm. The city blurred beneath them. Rivers of light, domes of crystal, towers vanishing into mist. Drones chased from behind, firing volleys of plasma. Elias swerved through the lightning, the skiff shaking violently. Hold on, he shouted. Leora gripped the side, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. You fly like a madman. He grinned. You jump like one. Another explosion rocked the hull. Sparks filled the cockpit. Leora reached across, pressing her glowing hand to the console, her bioenergy stabilizing the system. The ship steadied. Elias looked at her, stunned. You just saved us again, her voice softened. No, we saved each other. For a moment, through the chaos and fire, they locked eyes, human blue and alien silver, and something wordless passed between them. A bond forged not by species but by shared defiance. Then a massive shockwave hit. The skiff spun out of control, crashing through the outer barrier of the city. They plunged into the dark clouds beyond, vanishing from Serapha Prime's skies. Far above, in the palace tower, the High Sovereign watched the storm fade. His voice was quiet but heavy with meaning. Find them, he said, before the Dominion does. The crash was silent at first. No fire, no explosion, just the feeling of falling through eternity. Then the sound came, metal grinding, glass shattering, engines screaming in agony. And then, nothing. When Elias Ford woke, the world was quiet. He blinked through the haze, his head pounding. The sky above was no longer the shimmering blue of Serapha Prime. It was darker, washed in violet mist and 1,000 stars. The skiff lay broken in a field of glowing moss, its hull twisted like a wounded animal. He coughed, trying to move. Leora, a faint voice answered from nearby. Still alive. He turned, and there she was, lying against a cracked panel, her hair tangled, her silver robes streaked with ash. But her eyes, those brilliant, otherworldly eyes, were open. He exhaled in relief. You okay? She gave a weak smile. I've been better. You humans crash loudly. He laughed, then winced, clutching his ribs. Yeah, well, we don't exactly practice landing in alien storms. They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the soft hum of alien insects and the glow of distant moons. The storm was gone. Only peace, fragile, impossible peace, remained. By nightfall, Elias had built a small fire using wreckage fuel cells and mineral shards. Leora watched him curiously as he worked, his hands steady despite exhaustion. You know, she said, for someone from a primitive world, you're annoyingly resourceful. He smiled faintly. We kind of have to be. No laser palaces back home, just grit and stubbornness. Stubbornness, she echoed, rolling the unfamiliar word on her tongue. Yes, that you have in abundance, he looked over at her. You say that like it's a bad thing. She met his gaze and something unspoken passed between them. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Days passed. They made shelter under the skiff's shattered wing, scavenged for water and edible flora. Elias taught her to filter liquid using carbon mesh. She showed him how to summon energy from bioluminescent crystals. And slowly, something changed. The princess who once moved like she carried a crown began to laugh. The engineer who once doubted his worth began to believe he wasn't just surviving. He was living. One evening, under a violet twilight, Leora sat beside the fire, tracing a glowing sigil in the dirt. Do you ever miss your world? She asked quietly. Elias stared into the flames. Every day. But I think maybe I was supposed to end up here. She tilted her head. With us, with me? He looked at her. Maybe. Her breath caught, just a little. For a Seraphan, emotion was something controlled, filtered through duty. But here, stranded and stripped of rank, she felt something raw and real. She whispered, You're strange, Elias Ford. He grinned softly. Takes one to know one. They sat in silence again, the stars reflecting in her eyes like scattered diamonds. Then, distant thunder rolled across the horizon. Not weather this time, but engines. Leora's expression shifted instantly. Search drones. Elias stood scanning the sky. From your father's fleet? She nodded grimly. If they find us, they'll take me home. And they'll execute you. He turned toward her, decisive. Then we don't get found. Elias, no, he interrupted. You helped me escape. Now it's my turn. I'll draw them off. Her voice sharpened. You can't outrun them. He smiled that same impossible human smile. Maybe not. But I can buy you time. Leora's chest tightened. You always do this and risk yourself without thought. He looked at her gently. Not without thought. Just without hesitation. Before she could stop him, he began loading power cells into the wreck's thrusters, creating a decoy beacon. The sound would lure the drones miles away. Leora caught his wrist. If you go out there, you might not come back. He looked at her, really looked at her. I'd rather die free, he said softly, than live knowing I did nothing. And in that moment, Leora understood what made humans different. Not strength, not technology, but the fire in their hearts. The kind that burned even in the dark. She whispered, trembling, You foolish, beautiful creature. He smiled. Guess you'll just have to save me again. He ran into the mist, the decoy thrusters roaring behind him, drawing the drones away into the night. Leora stood in the violet glow, her heart breaking, not from fear this time, but from the realization that she could no longer imagine a world without him. The sky was alive with fire. 3 search drones burned through the violet mist, their beams slicing across the alien plane. Beneath them, Elias Ford ran. His lungs screamed, his body ached, but he didn't stop. Not while Leora was still out there, hiding, safe, free. He'd wired the wreck's thrusters to overload, drawing the fleet's attention miles away. If he was lucky, they'd think he'd crashed again. If not, well, humans were never famous for luck anyway. Behind him, the engines howled louder. They had locked onto his heat signature. He glanced back, panting. He muttered to himself. Definitely not lucky. Back at the crash site, Leora Van watched the streaks of light fade across the horizon, each one chasing the man she had tried and failed to keep from running toward danger. Her pulse raced. Her body said, stay hidden. Her heart screamed, go. Finally, she rose. She pressed her palms together, her eyes glowing faintly as ancient glyphs flickered around her hands. The ground beneath her shimmered. The air filled with light, the power of her lineage, the one she'd denied to save him, but now she would use it to save him again. The drones found Elias first. He had nowhere left to run, only a cliffside overlooking an endless void of clouds below. One drone hovered close, charging its plasma cannon. Elias stood firm, squinting into the glare. "All right," he whispered. "Guess this is where it ends." Then, the sky cracked open. A column of blue-white light tore through the clouds. The drone's targeting systems glitched, their engines screaming as their circuits fried in seconds. One by one they fell, smoking wrecks tumbling into the abyss, and from the light stepped Leora. Her cloak was gone, her royal sigils blazing across her arms and face. The very air bent around her. She looked like a storm given form, fierce, radiant, untouchable. Elias just stared. "Leora, what are you doing?" "Ending this," she said simply. She raised her hands, releasing another pulse that disabled the last drone in the sky. Its remains fell, the air suddenly quiet again. Then she turned to him, and for the first time he saw the tears in her eyes. "You were supposed to stay hidden," he laughed weakly. "You should know by now. Humans don't follow orders well." She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it brushed his cheek. "You could have died. Would have been worth it," he said softly, "if it kept you safe." Her breath caught. For a moment, neither spoke, only the sound of the wind between them. Then far above, the roar of larger engines filled the air. The Sovereign's flagship was descending. Leora looked up, her face hardening. "They found us." Elias squeezed her hand. "Then let's face them together." Minutes later, they stood surrounded by royal guards. The High Sovereign himself descended from the ship, his expression carved from stone. "Leora," he said, his voice low, "you defied my command, betrayed your title, and brought shame upon your house." He turned to Elias. "And you, human, you stole from our archives, disrupted our order, and corrupted my daughter's loyalty." Elias straightened. "I told the truth." The Sovereign's gaze lingered, not with anger this time, but with something like weariness. "Truth," he murmured, "has cost empires." Then he looked to Leora. "Choose, child. Return with me to Serapha Prime, or share his fate." Silence. The rain fell softly, glowing in the starlight. Leora's heart pounded. For all her life she had obeyed. For all her life she had believed, but not anymore. She stepped closer to Elias and took his hand. "I already chose." Gasps echoed through the guards. The Sovereign's eyes closed as if absorbing the weight of her words. When he opened them again, there was no fury, only sorrow. "Then go," he said finally. "Both of you. The Dominion has no place for your kind of faith." Elias blinked. "You're letting us live?" The Sovereign's gaze softened. "No empire can cage what it doesn't understand. Perhaps your chaos has something to teach us after all."